Yo, what's going on, guys? It is time for another reaction video, and today I will be reacting to something a little different than what I usually do. My mom just so happens to also be one of my biggest YouTube fans. Yeah, my mom watches literally every video I put out, and sometimes my dad watches with her too, so shout out to you, Mom and Dad. Thanks for checking out my videos. But I'm mentioning my mom because she actually came up with this idea. She suggested that I do a reaction to castles that are here in the US, and she sent me a link, and Mom, I'm not going to use the one you sent, and only because it was about a minute long. So I found a different one though. It's 13 minutes. Amazing castles in the US. So that's what we'll be reacting to today. Before we do that though, let's go ahead and hop over to their channel, and before I forget, I'm going to subscribe. If you guys like this video, if you appreciate this video that I put together, make sure to also go over and check out the channel Zero to Hero. And give them a like or subscribe, or check out the video there as well, because if they didn't put their video out, I wouldn't be able to react to it. And Zero to Hero, if you're seeing my video, I hope you don't mind that I used it for a reaction. I will be taking the video that you put together, your original video, and I will be adding it to my website here, All About the Life, which goes out to a pretty big audience of people who are just checking out all sorts of videos from YouTube. So let's go ahead and get into the video and check out these castles here in the US.
If you think about amazing castles, your mind may automatically jump to Europe, and you'd be right. Luckily though, Europe is not the only place that has these amazing pieces of history, and even in the much younger United States, we have our own fair share of castles that are well worth a visit. So let's plan our next road trip. From Italian-inspired architecture to massive estates. Stay tuned to number 1 to find out which castle was moved all the way from across the pond.
Wow, so somebody actually relocated, I guess, a castle from somewhere?
Number 10. Castello Di Amorosa. If you want the feel of an Italian wine farm in the beauty of the California landscape, then Castello Di Amorosa is just the place for you. Italian-style architecture and fine Italian wines are all found just outside the town of St. Helena in the Napa Valley. Unlike most castles you may hear about, or could be lucky enough to come across in your lifetime, this castle's construction began only in 1994 and was the vision of a 4th-generation Italian winemaker and entrepreneur, Dario Satui, who spent much of his life discovering medieval castles and wineries throughout Europe. He fell in love with 13th century Italian Tuscan-style architecture and took 13 years to complete the construction for its first opening in 2007.
13 years. That's amazing. I wonder how many square feet this place is. Is it because of the size that it took so long, or the type of construction that it took so long?
Today it continues the tradition it started in 2007 and is primarily a wine farm, specializing in Italian wines, and often hosts parties and weddings alike on its premises. Interestingly, despite its use as a wine farm, this modern example of a castle comes complete with a drawbridge and a dungeon, as well as a torture chamber.
That's pretty awesome to add those extra details.
To enhance the feeling that you are actually in a centuries-old castle. There is no mention as to whether or not the dungeon and torture chambers are used on people who drink too much of their wine though, so we suggest you proceed at your own risk. Number 9. Bolt Castle. Situated along the St. Lawrence River near New York City, the Bolt Castle lies among the spectacular...
It looks cool how it's sitting over the water.
Thousand Islands, and construction of this property started back in the year 1900 by millionaire George Bolt. He wanted to build the castle as a tribute to his wife and stated that it would rival any European castle of the time. But unfortunately, Bolt's wife fell ill and passed away just months before the completion. Devastated, Bolt halted all construction and never visited the island again.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Leaving the incomplete castle behind as a monument to his wife. From there, the castle would stand empty for 73 years. But in 1977, the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority decided to begin its restoration.
77 years vacant, that's amazing.
And at last, the castle was built up to what it was meant to be. Today it is a popular tourist attraction and weddings are even regularly held on the island. This castle is a great example of the power of restoration, and even though it was only opened in the early 1980s, it's a great example of 20th century architecture combined with rustic beauty.
Might have to add that spot to my bucket list.
Number 8. Coral Castle. Located just outside of Miami, Florida, the Coral Castle is very special for two reasons. First is that it is not strictly a castle at all, and second, because the entire project was done by just one man. As we mentioned already, the Coral Castle is not really a castle, but rather a collection of stones gathered in different shapes. Some of them do indeed resemble the shape of a house, complete with stone tables and chairs, while some of the others are just small piles of rocks that loosely resemble Stonehenge. Also, as we mentioned already, the entire place was built by just one man, a Mr. Edward Leeds Skelton back in 1923.
In 1923, so you can imagine the difficulty it would take to build something like this in 1923, moving those stones. We have all these tractors and things like that these days, but back then there probably was very little of that available to him, so that's very impressive.
Interestingly though, a lot of the construction here is shrouded in mystery due to Edward building it all by himself using nothing but ropes, pulleys, picks, and winches to move some very large stones. In all, the construction of the Coral Castle took 28 years for him to complete. Despite the name Coral, the castle was actually constructed entirely from limestone, and for decades it had a perfectly balanced stone gate that was so easy to open that even a child could open the door with just a slight push. Today though, the formerly perfectly balanced door's hinge has finally rusted away. While it is still a great tourist attraction, and people often stop by to admire the marvel that is the Coral Castle, the door takes a bit more effort to open. Number 7. Bannerman Castle. Located just 60 miles up the Hudson River from New York, there is a castle which today is only a shell of its former glory.
This is a much bigger one.
Known as the Bannerman Castle, construction started in the early 1900s when it was one of the most spectacular sights of the time. Built by a munitions merchant, Francis Bannerman, in an attempt to replicate the medieval fortress from which he was born, the castle was a success and served as his residence for many years until Bannerman died in 1918. But after the owner's death, the castle began to deteriorate. And, to make things worse, a fire broke out in 1969, destroying most of the building in the process. Today, what remains of the castle still stands, and often holds various events on the island throughout the year. One thing is for certain though, despite the fire and the castle being left to the elements for so many years, it is still one of the most beautiful buildings in the US and is a true example of European-style architecture in America.
It's another one that I would love to go visit in person.
Number 6. Biltmore Estates. As far as truly beautiful architecture goes, the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina is quite high on that list. Construction of the estate...
So to me, the other ones that I've seen so far look very much more like a traditional castle. This, over on the other hand, and if they're labeling this a castle, you know, I don't know about what's considered truly a castle or not, but to me this just looks like a huge house that is just more out of brick and stone than any other material. So I'm curious to see what they say, because this doesn't really ring castle to me compared to the others.
It started in 1889 by George Vanderbilt, and after 6 years of building...
Yeah, see, that doesn't look like a castle, that looks like a house.
Doors opened for the first time in 1895, despite the fact that the building was still under construction. During the time the estate was being built, Vanderbilt and his architect, Richard Morris Hunt, spent years traveling throughout Europe.
It's very unique in this area here. Hopefully you can see my mouse, but the way that this goes up at an angle is really cool.
Purchasing all kinds of valuables to put in the castle. This varied from paintings right up to carpets and furniture. Architecturally speaking, they were also largely inspired by their travels throughout Europe, and they used many of the sites that they saw in the design of the castle, creating, in the end, an awe-inspiring French Renaissance chateau. Today, the castle is still under full operation and now even includes award-winning wines and tours of the vineyards. It also has its own bowling alley and its world-renowned 70-foot ceiling banquet hall.
That's beautiful. That would be cool to see.
It doesn't matter if you are inside or outside of this building.
So that part of it, I don't think I'll be able to roll it back perfectly. Let me see. That kind of looks castle-esque to me, but overall it doesn't look as much like a castle as the other ones they'd shown so far.
Outside of this building, the sights and the beauty of this castle is an amazing thing to behold. Number 5, Fonthill Castle. This castle, found in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, definitely has the look of your traditional Count Dracula-style castle. Unfortunately though, or fortunately, depending on your tastes, this castle has a more down-to-earth story. Built between 1908 and 1912, the Fonthill Castle was the creation of Henry Chapman Mercer, an archaeologist, anthropologist, ceramist, scholar, as well as antiquarian, who clearly couldn't decide on just one field to follow. Originally built as his private home and showplace for his...
This is another one that just looks like a oversized home made primarily of brick and stone, less castle to me. But again, I don't know what defines an actual castle.
Collection of tiles and prints, he used this home as a base of operations during his lifetime. After he passed away, however, he wished for his massive multi-million-dollar castle to be turned into a museum, with the caveat of allowing his own housekeeper to have living rights inside the castle, where she lived out the remainder of her days until 1975. Today, the castle still serves as a museum to both the life of Mercer as well as his collection of tiles, prints, and pottery, while still maintaining a strict preservation policy.
Might have to put that one on the bucket list too. It's pretty cool.
Wherein the castle be kept as much like its original state as possible. Despite this castle being an actual museum of ancient tiles, it still attracts over 30,000 visitors a year. Number 4, Thornwood Castle. The story of this castle is an interesting one, because while it has only been in the US for around 100 years, its origins actually began more than 500 years ago. Chester Thorne is the brain behind this castle with 2 ages. While in England in 1907, he bought a 400-year-old manor before deciding that, although he liked it, he would like it much better in the US. So good old Chester decided it was a good idea to have the entire building dismantled and then shipped brick by brick over to Washington State in the US.
That's amazing that they could even accomplish something like that in those times. I just couldn't even imagine the amount of labeling and organizing to make sure and ensure that things get put back as closely as possible to how it was originally constructed.
He then hired famed architect Kirtland Kelsey Cutter to painstakingly reassemble the entire manor. The construction of the castle took 3 years to complete, after which Thorne presented the Elizabethan-themed castle to his wife as a display of his love. These days, the castle is an inn, and its Gothic, rustic charm.
There's another one, hopefully I don't keep saying this over and over because I don't know what the upcoming castles are going to look like. This looks less like a castle to me and just more like an oversized house.
Attracts thousands of guests a year. In addition to lavish rooms and its antique interior, the estate has a private dock and lakeside beach, as well as a sunken garden. A beautiful landscape designed by the famous Olmsted brothers. As far as rustic charm and a beautiful countryside scenery goes, this castle is definitely something you need to experience in your lifetime. Number 3, the Smithsonian Castle. Located on the opposite coast,
that looks a little bit more castle-esque to me.
This castle is the first of the Smithsonian buildings that were built throughout the...
Honestly, actually, it looks more like an old school commercial building for like a courthouse or a state building or something,
United States.
Or even a church.
Completed in 1855 and made out of what is now the iconic red sandstone, the building is today one of the most...
Now that very much looks like a castle right there, so it's got a mixture of both, I guess.
Most recognized in all of Washington, D.C. In fact, we are lucky to have the Smithsonian building today, and it is all thanks to one man that we have them. The project was started thanks to a donation from Frenchman James Smithson, who, despite donating the money for the construction of the building, had never set foot on American soil. Originally, the building was the home of Joseph Henry and his family. Joseph being the first secretary of the castle, and today a statue of him stands outside the building. Although it started out as just the one building, more government buildings as well as museums were built around it over the years, molding it into the spectacle that we know of today. And as a tribute to James Smithson, his crypt can now be found near the north entrance of the building. Have you ever visited any of the Smithsonian buildings? Let us know below. While you're there, remember to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button.
I personally have not visited any of them that I can think of, and good reminder, like I said at the beginning, go subscribe to his channel because I couldn't have made my video if he didn't have his video.
Number 2, Castle Gould. Situated a few minutes from New York City, the land on which Castle Gould stands was first bought back in 1900 by Howard Gould, husband of the then famous actress Catherine Clemens. After buying the land, Gould began construction.
This one very much looks more like a traditional style castle to me.
On the castle, modeling it after the Kilkenny Castle in Ireland. The castle was supposed to be the main residence on the property and was completed by 1904. However, Catherine Clemens rejected the castle and thought that it simply didn't suit her well enough. So Gould then built the Hempstead House for them instead, and the huge castle was used as a stable and servants' quarters for many years after. Seriously. Today, although the castle is not open for public tours, there is a visitor center and a great hall located under the castle's.
She rejected it. I would have been like, bye Felicia. You don't like this big old castle I just had made for you, then you don't deserve to have one.
Clock Tower, where functions are often held, including fitness classes and cultural events. Number 1, Cliff Palace. For number 1, we decided to include the natural beauty and native roots of the United States. Mesa Verde National Park in southern Colorado is quite different from most national parks you might.
This is actually somewhere I've wanted to visit for a really, really long time. I didn't know that this would have been included in castles, but I still want to go to this location.
Visit. Sure, it's home to rare species of wildlife, but these are not typically the reasons people visit this park. Situated on the wall of Cliff Canyon, you will find a small village that has seemingly been carved into the cliff face several hundred years ago. First discovered in 1888 by 2 cowboys searching for stray cattle, the Cliff Palace is believed to have been built in the 1200s and consists of around 150 rooms. Built by ancestral Puebloans, it's made out of sandstone and wood and is the largest cliff dwelling in North America. Archaeologists say that it would have housed around 100 people and that it formed part of other smaller dwellings also found in the area. They concluded that the palace was probably abandoned due to overcrowding and was ultimately forgotten about for approximately 300 years before its rediscovery. Today you can take a guided tour through the palace, and you can get a glimpse of life from a few centuries ago, including the Tower Square, which is a tall building approximately the same height as the roof of the cave and consists of 4 separate floors. Although the tower had to be restored, the palace and surrounding dwellings give visitors an epic experience. Let us know which of these you would want to visit in the comments below, and thanks for watching.
Pretty interesting video. Thanks Mom for suggesting that I check out a castle video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you've got other suggestions similar to this one, whether it's like architectural type stuff or unique locations through the US or anywhere in the world really, tell me in the comments below, because I'm always looking for other stuff to do reactions to. And if you wouldn't mind helping me out, please share this video, whether it's on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, or even email, or wherever you spend your time socially online. I would greatly appreciate you sharing the video so that I can continue to grow my audience. That's about it. I will see you guys in the next video. Later.